This episode of Ahsoka was always, I think, going to struggle to replicate the highs of last week for a lot of people. However, it does do a really good job of moving the plot forward, continuing the mystery, and providing some really solid character development and world building too. However, once again, it is the standout performance from Ray Stevenson's Baylan Skoll that really does carry this episode on its back. Now, there will be spoilers ahead, so you have been warned. So, this episode starts with Ahsoka and Huyang travelling inside of the space whale and just talking about the Jedi and Sabine's decision to help the enemy. I thought this was a small but good interaction, but as a lover of the history of Star Wars, this was just a tease that frustrated me. They start to talk about the history of the Jedi Order, and Ahsoka asks Huyang if he can tell her a story about the Jedi's past. And so he begins to tell this story, and he starts it with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then it just cuts off, and I want to know, give me this information. I want to know what happened in the past. Tell me these stories about Jedi, even if it's for a minute or two. Just give me something. Don't tease me and then throw it away. We then switch over to our villains who have arrived on Peridia, a planet in the new galaxy, and I have to say I was disappointed with this. I think there was an opportunity to do something creative and unique in terms of the visual presentation of this new planet in a new galaxy, but it was just kind of uninspired. It's just a drab brown planet with a bunch of statues littered around and, it looks like whales during a foggy early evening in the winter. With that said though, it is revealed that this planet is actually where the Purrgil go to die, and there is this big graveyard of corpses in its orbit, which I thought was really quite ominous. But either way, they arrive on this building that looks exactly like Minas Tirith. It's like they didn't even try to come up with their own design. And on the top there is this stone formation where 3 Night Sisters are just chilling and they're waiting for the arrival of Morgan Elsbeth. They then start speaking to her about how they called to her from across the galaxy, and they seem to speak in riddles in a way. However, they see Sabine as a threat because she supposedly reeks of Jedi. And so they lock her up in this weird laser prison thing, and then they put her in jail in not Minas Tirith. I thought the dialogue here was okay, and my only real issue with this whole scene is, I've said this in pretty much every review, I just don't like Morgan Elsbeth. I'm not going to be a broken record and go into why. I just do not like the character at all. However, after this, we have a wonderful interaction between Baylan and Shin. These two characters, for me, are the real heartbeat of this show, despite it being called Ahsoka, because they are two of the most interesting characters that Disney's Star Wars has produced. The dynamic between these two, the absolutely captivating performance of Ray Stevenson every single time he's on the screen, the mystery, the allure. I'm honestly looking forward to every single moment we have with these two characters over everybody else, simply on the basis that they are the most interesting. What are they trying to do? What are their goals? What is their role in this grander story? And in this moment, Baylan is speaking quite fondly of his time as a Jedi and how there were stories about Peridia and this galaxy. But at the same time, he recognizes that the Jedi Order were flawed despite his fondness, and that throughout history it's always the Jedi Order falling with a new Empire rising, and then the Empire falling and a new Jedi Order rising, and this is just rinse and repeated over thousands of years. And that what he is looking for is not power, but actually the means to a new beginning and to stop the cycle of what seems to be the Jedi and the Sith. For me, with my experience of Disney Star Wars, this is the first character that really evokes that sense of Old Republic spirit. This is a character that doesn't really fit into the stories that we've got more recently. I've always seen Disney Star Wars as very kind of binary in its light side versus dark side view. There is a few exceptions in some of the external media, but in terms of live action, Baylan is a character that seems to break away from that tradition, and I'm loving it. And it really, really does help with the way Ray Stevenson commands the screen, the way he inflects his dialogue, the subtlety of his eye movements and facial expressions in conjunction to his emotions. He is just so damn good in this show. Anyway, the Chimera then arrives, and I'm really glad they got to the point. There was a lot of speculation that Thrawn was only going to show up right at the end like a tease, but no, he is here. The Chimera looks great in live action. I also thought the shot of the Chimera's introduction was really good. I really enjoyed the scale of dread that it evoked, as well as the audio design, which was actually really strong. And Thrawn's army is then revealed. They're a bunch of what looks like broken stormtroopers put back together. I couldn't quite tell if it was Night System magic that was creating them the same way that Marok did with the smoke, or perhaps they were literally reanimated corpses. But either way, there is a lot of them, and they looked really good. I loved the costume design for them. And also, Thrawn's second-in-command, Enoch, who has this golden face mask attached to his helmet, also looked really cool too. And overall, I thought the introduction was actually well done. It was very grandiose, and I enjoyed the cinematography for the most part. However, I could tell that they were using the volume, and there were little parts of it that were a bit iffy. But the most important thing, Thrawn, I thought looked pretty good. To me, the overall presence and the performance and the voice is generally more important than the direct one-to-one visual translation, and so having Lars Mikkelsen actually play the character is a huge win. He really does bring that poise that is so synonymous with his work in the animations. But my only issue is here... his trousers are really bad. I don't know what was going on with the costume design here, but for some reason, his upper half is perfectly fitted to his physique and it looks really good. And then his trousers are just baggy and creased and they don't fit him. And this just doesn't, to me, represent the aura of Thrawn, who is usually so well presented and so, I don't know, just perfect in a way. This was something that was very glaring to me from the moment he appeared on the screen. But everything else from the introduction and the visuals was solid, and I also thought the first bit of dialogue when he was introduced was really quite poetic. It seems that Thrawn had a deal with the 3 wise witches of Not Minas Tirith, and in exchange for calling Morgan Elsbeth to this planet, he has to take something back to his galaxy, which I believe is going to be the remains of Night Sisters or something, so they can maybe rebuild them. They mentioned something about catacombs, so I think it's alluded to. There is also then this small interaction between Thrawn and Baylan, and it is revealed that Baylan was a general during the Clone Wars, which is a little bit odd because Ahsoka never heard of him, so we'll see where they go with that, or if they just completely ignore it. Anyway, Sabine is brought before Thrawn, and the two of them have a small exchange. I thought the dialogue here was pretty strong overall, but the majority of the heavy lifting is done by Lars Mikkelsen's Thrawn. The performance is overall very strong, but he intends to be honest and reveals that he doesn't know where Ezra is, but they do have intel as to where he might be, and that for helping him, he is willing to help her and provide her provisions and a way of traversing the landscape to find her friend. But there is glimpses of that ruthless, cold, calculating Thrawn that I really like. However, something is then revealed to be what is really the star of the show, and that is what I guess becomes Sabine's howler. This is like a crocodile dog rat thing, and he looks so good. The CGI on him is impeccable, and he is the cutest thing on the planet. Like, I would die for him. However, as Sabine leaves, of course, she is double-crossed by Thrawn, who claims that the agreement has been upheld, and that if Sabine manages to find Ezra, well, Baylan and Shin are to basically stalk her and kill them both. Now, Sabine starts riding this howler for about 10 seconds, and then she is attacked by a bunch of mercenaries, of course. They shoot at the howler, who runs away, and so Sabine fights off like 5 or 6 of these dudes. Now, the choreography was okay, it wasn't anything special, but Sabine really did have plot armor here, and glaringly so, because these mercenaries get so many shots on her, and I mean they literally hit her multiple times over and over again, but for some reason she's able to block bullets or blaster bolts, and for some reason they also don't aim for her head at any point. But unfortunately, during the fight, the transponder location detector thing that had the intel on Ezra's whereabouts was damaged, so Sabine is now basically lost. The Howler then comes back, but Sabine walks away and is telling him off because he abandoned her. However, he's just kind of following her around like a lost puppy that's been scolded. And look, I am a sucker for cute animals. I loved this whole sequence. I love the Howler. If anything happens to him, I will personally write a letter of complaint to Lucasfilm. They do eventually make up though when the Howler gets a scent of something, and because she has nowhere else to go, she gets on his back and just follows his nose. They then come into this swampy area where the Howler starts drinking water, and Sabine gets really frustrated with him because she thinks he's just guided her to get a drink. But as he is drinking, he nudges the rocks around the water, and the rocks are revealed to be these turtle things. I don't know, I really like the designs and I really appreciate the usage of animatronic over CGI. It was very Star Warsy, it was very whimsical and fun, and I enjoyed that. However, they can't interact with one another because they don't speak the same language, and it also seems to be frightened of the Howler. But Sabine calms the Howler down, and the turtle thing recognizes the Rebellion logo on her shoulder pad. After seeing the logo, the creature then reveals it also has a necklace with the logo on too, and Sabine then says the name Ezra Bridger and they repeat it back to her like they know it. And then it is revealed that all of the rocks in this entire area were actually these turtle things hiding. They then all start walking off and Sabine praises the Howler, basically calling him a good boy, and then they all start following the turtles. Now, the next sequence was, despite everything that happened in this episode, my favourite part, because we are once again back with Baylan and Shin, who are tracking Sabine, and they tease ancient mystery, which, as I mentioned earlier on, is what I love the most. Now, Baylan refers to Ezra as a Boken Jedi, which is a brand new term, Jedi that were trained after the fall of the Order. However, he mentions to Shin that he isn't training her to be like that. He is training her for a very different purpose, to be more, to be better. He mentions that he does miss the Jedi and the general idea of the Jedi Order, but again mentions its weaknesses and its failings and how, with what they were becoming, there was really no future for it, and that on this planet something was calling to him, a power that everybody else was fearing, something old, something great. And this is where I just get so excited, what could it possibly be? Now, there's a number of things I think it might be if they were leaning into the expanded universe. Some people say that it might be the Zepho and their technology. Perhaps it is the Rakatans, they have teased it multiple times, or at least what is left of them. Or maybe they do something even crazier, and maybe it's the Mother, aka Abeloth, who is calling to him from across the stars, just like she kind of does in the expanded universe, who knows. But of course, before they could continue, just like Ahsoka and Huyang earlier, they are interrupted, this time by bandits. However, Baylan tells Shin to stay her hand, and that bloodshed isn't necessary, and they can use them to their advantage. And to me, this doesn't sound like a man who is corrupted by the dark side. This sounds like a man who is in total control of his emotions and his feelings. Very interesting. We then jump back to Sabine, who is being guided by the turtles, and they've reached some nomad village, and we have this quite slow-paced sequence of them walking through the village and seeing all the different sides to it. You've got the chef turtles cooking, you've got the children turtles being looked after, and I think there was even some builder turtles working on the houses. And then there is, of course, the big reveal. Ezra is actually with the turtles, and Sabine and Ezra have their big reunion. Now, for me, this was never what Ahsoka was going to be about. I really wanted this show to expand upon the mythology and the mysticism and the Force and the history of these ancient orders, and I am getting that personally. And so while most of the internet is losing its mind over this reunion, I think it's cool, but I didn't think it was anything special for me personally. If anything, I actually think it's pretty silly that Ezra is just kind of chilling out in the open with a bunch of turtles, and somehow Thrawn didn't find him at all. Perhaps there's more story there though. But I did think that there was some nice dialogue here. They did manage to capture the playful nature between Sabine and Ezra, and I think that was portrayed well. And you can see that Ezra is excited that maybe Sabine has a way of getting him home, but of course, in her eyes, she can't. But the introduction of Ezra is more of a cameo than anything else, so we'll see what they do with him next week. I also thought that he looked pretty damn good for the role too, to be fair, besides the fact that they use contact lenses, which, like Hera, are obnoxiously standout. But I think they generally nailed the hair, his mannerisms, his general, presence on the screen, and I think he looked pretty solid with a beard too. The final sequence of this episode then involves Thrawn, who is being told by the witches of Not Minas Tirith that they sense the presence of another Jedi arriving on Peridia, to which he says that we have to presume that this is Ahsoka, despite the fact that Baylan claimed to have killed her. So in typical Thrawn fashion, he then tells Morgan that he wants to know everything there is to know about Ahsoka Tano so that he can find the means to destroy her. He then tells them to prepare their defenses and to kill any star whales that go near the planet. And then the episode ends. And with that, overall, I think we had a very, very solid episode. I think this one really stood out in terms of its world building and character development, more specifically in regards to Baylan and Shin, who I mentioned many times now are my standout characters in this show, and the characters that I look forward to seeing most weeks because I just want to know what's going on. It also had some minor hiccups, I can't not talk about them. I think the visuals of the planet were a bit uninspired, maybe the biome could have been different. The cinematography was a tad weak at times, but only at times, and Thrawn really does need a better tailor for his trousers. But as I mentioned a few weeks ago, the key to me here with this show being good is consistency. Even though the pacing of each episode is chop and change, apparently, the overall tone and the overall feeling of the show has been completely consistent. It feels like a high-end Star Wars show that in a way knows what it wants to be, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And if it does manage to pull off the last 2 episodes in a consistent and highly entertaining way, this is definitely on its way to being up there with Andor and The Mandalorian Season 1, as one of the best Star Wars shows ever made. And also, another big credit has to go to the musicians and the composers, because the music in this episode was wonderful, just like all of the others. But anyway, if you made it this far, thank you, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button, it helps me out a great deal. Also, if you haven't, perhaps consider subscribing so you are notified for next week's review of Ahsoka when it goes live. I'll see you guys in the next video. But until then, may the Force be with you. Always.